Thank you so much for joining us today for what I believe will be a really fruitful, powerful, and inspiring conversation amongst incredible youth activists, organizers, and folks committed to the development of young adults. So this is the first in a series of 5 sessions in what we've titled Aging Out or Growing Together, Flipping the Youth Service Paradigm to Better Support Young Adulthood. My name is Oriana Ides, and my pronouns are she, hers. I'm joining you from unceded Ohlone land. And I am really honored to facilitate this conversation amongst folks that I really respect in the field of youth development. And briefly share about me, I've been 20 years in the field of education and healing work as a teacher, administrator, college access director. The views and opinions and content expressed in this presentation don't necessarily reflect the views, opinions, and policies of the Center for Mental Health Services in SAMHSA. So as I said, today is the first session in a series of 5, the words and the space to see young folks transitioning to adulthood as whole, as full, to really connect with their humanity and their full self needs. And then we'll be moving in throughout this series to different technical, kind of more honed in ways of supporting them through networking, through uplifting culturally responsive and sustaining practices, and then how to navigate resistance. And so just a little preview of where we're going in this series and where we are today. I want to return to the words of Tupac Shakur. He was 19 years old when he wrote this poem. Lean in to what he might have been experiencing as a 19-year-old in Oakland, California, writing this poem. What barriers or roadblocks might he have come up against in his journey? What feelings might he have been wading through at 19? What might he have been needing emotionally, physically, financially, relationally? Poem reminds me that young people are incredibly powerful and have tremendous insight into their own lived experience, their own realities, and their own needs. And that really, as adults, it is our role, as older adults, it is our role to create the space for them to connect with their own power and their own sense of knowing. I'd like to invite you to hold the image of a young adult that you've worked with in your life, in your mind. Hold an image of them in your heart. It could be you as a young person. It could be someone you grew up alongside, or it can be someone you had the honor and privilege of working with as a service provider. This series came out of the knowing that adolescence is a time of wonderfully dynamic change, right? In the brain and in the external world of our young people, and that there's shifts nonlinear, right? Grappling with a number of questions, a number of wonderings around how we understand the developmental needs of young people ages 17 to 26. How we're communicating, right, explicitly and not explicitly, subliminally, how we're communicating unrealistic or Western expectations of independence upon this age group. We're wondering what happens to young people in this age range that aren't on a direct path towards continued education. We're wondering what happens to the young folks who relied heavily on their school communities for services and supports. We're wondering how to become bridges with them through this age period, knowing that 30% of transitional age young folks are learning of the first time or really surfacing mental health needs, more severe mental health needs right now. That's a pretty alarming statistic. And we're wondering what's happening to our system-involved young folks, those struggling with mental health issues or living in neighborhoods that are too expensive for them to exist within. Right. And so those grapplings push us to wonder this guiding question here: how might our organizational values, our program design, our implementation strategies, and long-term visions for young adults need to expand to support their ever-evolving and holistic needs? I'm going to start to introduce the panel in just a minute. They'll have some time to share who they are, what calls them to the work that they're doing. Beautiful quote by Jay Gillian, I want to elevate as we begin to introduce panelists. So young people know intuitively that they must figure out how to become adults, but their schools are designed to infantilize them, to simplify and standardize their verbal expressions, to restrict and control their bodies, to crush independent, non-conforming thought. Nevertheless, nearly everyone they trust tells them school is the way out of poverty and dependency. Panelists today to share how they're navigating these tensions with young folks, how their organizations, their program design, how their relationships are supporting young folks and holding all of these complexities. And so I want to first introduce Tiffany Marie, who's the co-director in the Institute for Regenerative Futures and a professor of teacher education in the Ethnic Studies Department at San Francisco State University, where her research focuses on health disparities, the study of anti-Blackness, and the social determinant of health, and the embodiment of critical pedagogies as an attenuating agent of toxic stress in Black children. Her broader research interests integrate theoretical frameworks and methods from public health, critical race studies, and education. I have the privilege of meeting Tiffany Marie as a professor at San Francisco State University, but also my goddaughter has been in her program from maybe even kindergarten through high school. And it's been just incredibly beautiful to witness the way you've held her and supported her at different stages of her life.
Hello, everyone. Good morning for some and afternoon for others, depending on where you are. It's an honor to be here with you all today. And to Oriana's point, I've been doing this work in schools, particularly for about 17 years. First started with an organization, H2O Productions, that was really about buffering the impacts of schooling on young people. So we wanted to center the arts and creative expression, as well as supporting young people with their academic development. That then transitioned, and I'll talk a little bit about why, to actually with Oriana's niece's cohort. Once they graduated, a lot of that work transitioned toward an unschooling model based on a lot of what we had seen them experiencing. And we shifted toward H2O became this idea of apocalyptic education that was invested more in school abolition, that we saw hand in hand with youth wellness. We understood that you couldn't have both, can't have youth wellness and schools coexisting. And so the idea of apocalyptic education was an investment and really a celebration of a shifting from schools and sites of schooling towards sites of education. And more recently, my work with apocalyptic education. While I've done work at San Francisco State, I'm actually at San Jose State University doing work in teacher education and ethnic studies, but now working with a research institute that we've launched called the Institute for Regenerative Futures, which more broadly focuses on and centers efforts of unschooling, centers efforts of youth wellness, and supports educators, community advocates from around the nation to be able to bolster their work. I'm excited to share some of my work and understandings and wisdom that's come from it with you all today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. So I'm gonna introduce our next panelist, Sikander Iqbal, who's the Deputy Director of Urban Peace Movement here in Oakland, California, and he oversees general operation and programs. He also plays a critical role in Urban Peace Movement's community healing and youth leadership development work. Over the past 14 years, Sikander has served through leading community street outreach and violence interruption, implementing restorative and transformative justice, and leading healing-centered retreats for directly impacted youth and young adults. So welcome, Sikander.
Yeah, I mean, I'm currently the Deputy Director of Urban Peace Movement, and one of the things that I would think I was lucky to be able to get involved in this line of work as a young person who was in my transitional age myself. I think I had the pleasure and the benefit of being able to work with my peers while we were in that age range, and I've kind of really dedicated most of my life since I've left school to working with people who are in the Tay age range, the 16 to 24 age range. And I was just lucky enough to land in spaces that did offer me some support to be able to harness my leadership skills and create pathways for other people. And you kind of see how important that is. I mean, you guys touched on a lot of it already, so I won't drill too deep into it, but I just feel really honored and humbled to be here. And yeah, I mean, I've done everything: street outreach, youth leadership development, tried to figure out ways to get young people into spaces, because we know that a lot of boards and commissions and things like that, they're not really designed for young people to participate in, or a lot of times when there are spaces for young people carved out, it's really just a space for people to check a box off. And so we've really been fighting a lot to identify ways to kind of break that open and say, well, if there's going to be young people here, we're going to make sure that they have the space that they deserve to speak and to have their voices heard. A big component of Urban Peace Movement's work, and what I've been dedicated to even prior to coming to Urban Peace Movement, is to say that if we're serious about doing anything positive or anything forward thinking, if we don't have the people who are directly impacted by the decisions that are made, that we're not really serious about making any kind of movement forward or any changes. So a lot of our focus is directed at getting young people in the Tay age range, specifically directly impacted young people, meaning for us, directly impacted by the criminal justice system, to be able to be in spaces and have the platform to, one, harness their leadership skills, and then also to be able to be a voice and share their expertise from their experiences to help really reform and even dismantle systems that have caused harm.
Thank you so much. So next, I'd like to introduce Kazani Finau, is the San Francisco Director of the Young Women's Freedom Center. His current work is deeply influenced and guided by his lived experience, navigating adolescence and young adulthood in San Francisco, third generation mass incarceration victim and of Samoan descent.
I am actually the site director for Young Women's Freedom Center in San Francisco. My pronouns are he, him, his. Thank you for the space. It is an honor to be in this space with all the panelists and all the folks. And also good afternoon to the folks in the East Coast. I've seen folks across the nation on this panel, so that's amazing. That's beautiful. A little bit more about myself. I'm from San Francisco. I'm second generation, born and raised in Frisco. Also third generation of mass incarceration. My grandfather was someone who was formerly incarcerated when my grandparents migrated from Samoa in the late 60s to the mainland for economic opportunities. And so from there, my grandparents also did a lot of hustling, if I could speak to that. But due to their hustling and what they have done for our family, I definitely have took all of that in, and now today I lead with love. And so I'm very passionate about young people specifically because of I'm someone who also has navigated since the age of 14 couch surfing and many more other systems and the school system. And so that's why I give my life to this work, to this. For me, this is not work. This is a lifestyle. I'm embedded. It's my livelihood. And so I'm also learning that a lot of this isn't personal, but it is. And so I show up fully for young people and their families. And I also have created a lot of new cycles in my life to get to a place where I can not be burned out and continue the work I'm doing for all the young folks that I support, and just for the young folks I haven't met. So that's my passion. That's what I'm dedicated to while I'm here on earth and living and walking. I'm very grateful to have this space. I do work for the Young Women's Freedom Center. I've been a part of them. I came back this January of 2022. I had left in 2020, but I'm back now as a director. I was the lead organizer, which my comrade is also on this panel. And so now we're tag teaming, and now we are shifting and moving and grooving and trying to get this sanctuary city of San Francisco back to being radical. And for those who are still left in San Francisco. And the population that Young Women's Freedom Center support are trans young people, non-binary young people, women and girls that are definitely marginalized and most definitely directly impacted. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm going ahead and pass that torch back to you.
Appreciate you uplifting the fact that this work is so personal for many of us. And so the question, right, how do we support our own wellness? How to create boundary in the work that we do that allows us to be whole and healthy and well and show up. Our next panelist, that's Lucero Herrera, who is the lead organizer at the Young Women's Freedom Center with Kasani in San Francisco, and works to support young women, trans and gender expansive youth in gaining agency over their own lives. A process that allows them to define and explore what self-sufficiency means to them. Personally, Lucero believes in meeting young women where they are at and works with them over time to deepen their self-awareness and understand what justice means for themselves, their children, and their community. So welcome, Lucero.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Lucero Herrera. My pronouns are she, her, hers. A little bit about myself. I'm 33. I was born in El Salvador during the Civil War. My mom came here as a single mother to the United States, and later we were profiled and targeted. I was charged as an adult at the age of 17 and went through the cycle of incarceration at the adult justice system. Later, I was released from prison at the age of 22. I didn't get no alternatives or resources at that age. I had to find my own research by the age of 25. By the age of 24, I was cut off a lot of resources. I wasn't full developed as a adult or a young adult. So that's a little bit about myself. I do meet young women, trans or genders, gender non-conforming folks where they're at. I go inside juvenile hall, the adult justice system. I focus inside for the policy of the juvenile hall closure. We also practice liberation pedagogy of the oppressed here at the Young Women's Freedom Center, where they start to have a development of their own selves and how political, economic, historical has been impacted in their own lives, so they can start having understanding of the world and how they fit in the world. So that's a little bit about myself. I believe in self-determination. I believe in young people finding their self-sufficiency to make decisions on their own with the support of a self-advocate. So that's a little bit about myself. Thank you. I'm a mother to 2 children as well. I was incarcerated when I was pregnant.
And so the first question that I want to pose to our panelists, and everyone will have an opportunity to answer this question, is what are the unique experiences and needs of 17 to 26-year-olds navigating the transition from adolescence to adulthood? So thinking interpersonally, emotionally, cognitively, relationally, in terms of the community that they're existing within, what are the needs that they are navigating?
Housing, just gonna name it, housing. Housing is definitely a piece that a lot of young folks are navigating and needing. It's a basic need. It's how are we in community across the nation, across the world, efficiently building and creating these ecosystems for young folks to live. Those strategies, what are those plans? What are those things look like for us to plan out to create sustainable housing for young folks without limitations, without curfew, without all these requirements, things that overwhelm them already, that they're already overwhelmed with, that they're navigating by themselves. And the reason why I said housing first was because I'm someone also who was couch surfing while going to 5 different high schools at the same time. So, and keeping a 3.0. A lot of young folks aren't like me, but how do we keep an open mindedness to it as well? Why these young folks are navigating housing.
The needs of young people in those ages are the needs of all of us, right? And I don't think there's too much of a difference. I think we all have a need for spaces that protect our intuition, for spaces that cultivate and maintain a sense of belonging, that support us in reconnection to the natural world, that support our connection to our cultural tools and our medicine that we use to sustain and heal ourselves. And, I say that because, and for young people, I think there's specificity around it because many of them have just, in those age groups, have just survived schooling. And I say survived as an educator. And I think a lot of other educators are beginning to admit this, that many youth, regardless of their achievement in schools, haven't usually thrived, but have survived those spaces. And a lot of youth in that time are navigating a whole bunch of traumas. We live in an incredibly anti-youth society. Folks are navigating their racialized traumas. And then schools often don't do a really solid job in responding to that, and then becoming another form of trauma that young people are surviving. So like schools typically exacerbate the conditions through competition, through grading, through standardized testing that is not holistically assessing learning. And then really by doing away with a lot of arts and cultural programs that would support youth wellness in the most robust ways. Malidoma Somé, in the Healing Wisdom of Africa, he talks about going off to college. And then when he comes back to his community, he's cast away into ceremony, into healing, because his tribal members knew that his time there, while it may have had some benefits, they knew that he needed to heal from those experiences. And I think likewise, after our young people have survived school, I think we need to support them in healing from that, to return to the processes of their intuitive development. I think that time after can be an incredibly lonely process when school has been the primary space where you connect with your peers in a sense of community. So that sense of belonging is really vital. And then this space to protect their intuition. I often see young people in schools and spending all this time as healers, as community advocates, and rarely ever rewarded or celebrated for those skills. And then them not understanding that that is actually something that can transition into their sacred purpose, or what we call the language that we use of like a career path.
The basic needs that they actually need is emotional support with finding their self-determination, and mentor that could lead them the right way, reconnecting them back to the community. I think that's the most important one, because sometimes when you go through the system, you are far away from your community, and coming back and getting reconnected and getting the services that you actually need and the resources. The things that I have experienced, even as basic needs, getting your ID, birth certificate, housing, and these are basic human rights. And this is something that they struggle with. I even myself, I have struggled with this as a young adult, especially getting out of prison and not being born here and having to carry my parole for 5 years because the DMV had a red flag and I wasn't able to get my actual things that I actually needed. And these are things that I actually see in young adults that I support, even in the adult justice system, and getting out with no type of documents, any support or a plan, or even being connected with a mentor or advocate.
Yeah, I would just add in, I think the stuff that everybody's saying is really resonating, especially Dr. Marie. I just came back before this panel after getting in a verbal altercation in my daughter's school over handing out tardy slips. and I share that because I think you're right. I mean, we spend most of our childhood and adolescence in spaces that are really designed around dehumanizing us, shaming us, and humiliating us. Like I watched all these kids come in and have to come in and explain why they're late to school to the office lady, and then they have to walk in and present this tardy slip to the front of the class. It doesn't improve their attendance at all, but it's just, to me, that it's just one of the many things that happen throughout the time in school. I remember in high school, my school did lockouts. So if you were a minute late to school, they would lock all the doors. They would send campus security around they would do a sweep. If you got swept up, you would go to the office. If you got swept up 3 times in a month, you would get Saturday school. If you got Saturday school 3 times, you'd be suspended from school. And there's no real consideration about what people are dealing with. And so we're coming out of a system that is already designed to not really care about us. On top of it, that the educational system is just classist and racist and sexist in its foundation. And so then once you graduate, you're expected to do all the things that you were trained not to do, right? Like adulthood is really romanticized, and a lot of us have these dreams about what does it mean to be an adult. And I think at least for us, I believe, and in my experience, is that we have these fantasies about adulthood because childhood is so traumatic. They've made it so traumatic, especially for kids of color. And so you do have these dreams about who you are, who you want to be, where you want to go, but you don't get any of the support. There's no structures in place to help chart that path with you. And so it's really like a sink or swim situation. And those who have the resources and the luck are the ones who end up usually navigating out of that. And so a lot of the work that we try to do is provide that pathway for as many young people as possible, while also trying to put them in positions to, change the circumstances. Because if we're not changing the circumstances that we exist in, what are we really doing, right? We're just kind of institutionalizing the brokenness of the system. So it really is about allowing people not just to determine their own destiny for themselves, but to have dignity, and to also be a part of determining the destiny for their communities, because we know what's wrong, right? And we know that there's a hierarchy of needs, and everybody needs housing, healthcare, food, clothing, decent clothing, even meaningful employment, right? Some type of ownership. And we see all the ways that we're locked out of it. When I was working at Youth Uprising, so as the last vignette, and then I'll close out, is another way they would do this is OPD would come to Castlemont High School every day after school, and they would hand out jaywalking tickets to kids because the bus stop is across the street, but the crosswalks were down the street. So they would come and just hand out jaywalking tickets to kids. And then the way it would roll out is that most of these kids didn't know what to do with their jaywalking tickets. So then they would get delayed, they would get penalized, and before you know it, there's a $700 fine. And then by the time they turn 16 and 17, because they have these jaywalking tickets, they can't get driver's licenses. And they're living in food deserts. There's no access to real employment opportunities. So it kind of just creates this snowball effect. And then the police get to just say, oh, well, we're doing our job. We're protecting these kids by telling them, punishing them for jaywalking, really to get to a bus stop that they go to every day back and forth, So so yeah, it's just stuff like that we're like constantly in a position where we're just fighting for, just to be able to cross the street. So some of these things, even though they sound really simple, they feel so out of reach sometimes.
next question is, what are the barriers, right? That young folks are needing to heal from the school system in some regard. That's something 17 to 24-year-olds, as you're exiting this system, this institution, that there needs to be ways, spaces, support in healing and unlearning and kind of cleansing ourselves from the trauma of the school system.
So much of what I've realized is the pace of our society is off. And capitalism informs that, of course. And there was another mother who helped me understand with wisdom from an elder that we should move at the pace that parents have to move in order to ensure health and well-being. And the reality is we don't. It's such a fast-paced capitalist society.
Thank you. Many young adults, the barrier that they are facing in their journeys are basic needs that should be their basic human right. Adults dictating their lives, such as probation systems, asking them what they actually need, and just making decisions on behalf of them of themselves. And as an adult, we got to ask young people what they need. We got to have a conversation with them, and we don't sometimes, as an adult who are part of the system, don't have conversations with young people, not being supported in their self-determination or the direction to create positive changes in their lives or in their communities. Also, another barrier they are facing are resources to address trauma, access to healing and wellness. They have gone through so much in the world, and when you get support with healing and wellness and actually someone helping you with your self-determination plan, you're able to move in the world where you're not being held back, or you're able to live your full self and find your independence to be free from these systems. Even myself, they cut me off my resources at 24, and I didn't know what to do. I was homeless, and my mother later was homeless herself. I went through my second gentrification in the Mission District, and I wasn't well connected in my community no more because I was so in my incarceration cycle. And that's something that this is why I continue with the work that I do, because seeing young adults, you're not fully developed. You're not a full adult yet. You don't even know what an adult is. You're still trying to figure out your young self and trying to heal from the trauma that you have gone through as a young person. And access to healing and wellness that supported me. I started doing theater work, telling my story. And when I found that on my own, probation, parole never helped me. They never supported me, even with my basic needs from getting my ID. I had to struggle and navigate, and I see a lot of young people going through that to this day. And to be a person to help them in their self-determination and seeing in their full independence, graduating high school, getting a job, getting housing, and not being in a shelter. And I'm not talking about just a shelter or emergency. They actually have housing, and that's something that I feel good that this is what the Young Women's Freedom Center does. And building their self-determination is very important, especially when adults want to dictate your life and tell you what to do and what are your needs. When you know your needs, you're a person who have struggled, and your experience makes you an expertise. So that's something that I see young adults and the barriers that they go through, especially in the systems, the adult system or the juvenile hall system.
This healing work, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about core memories, and I'm thinking about children, and as we go through life, what supports and what kind of maybe hinders or delays our ability to kind of visions or pictures of ourselves, and how hard that work is, right? That work can take an entire lifetime, and yet we can struggle with a 17 or 19-year-old that's not showing up for the job. But what is the core memory, or what is the core belief? So the next question is for Sikander and Kasani. How specifically is your organization thinking about adjusting and supporting the needs of this population?
So Young Women's Freedom Center, we've been around for 30 years, since 1993. Started off with the Sun Coalition, also moving into Survival Project, directly led by young people who are in survival. And so today we have evolved from Center for Young Women Development to Young Women's Freedom Center, who is holding space for a population that is very vulnerable. Young Women's Freedom Center we say this term, which definitely got trendy in this movement and hijacked, we meet people where they're at. And so when we say we meet people where they're at, the young people where they're at, we're talking about on the streets, inside detention facilities, prisons. We're talking about wherever it is that the young person is. We're exactly physically meeting you where you're at, and on a spiritual level, a mental level of how folks who are staff at Young Women's Freedom Center. The magical part about it is that like folks who are employed here at the center are directly impacted. And so has a unique experience of lived experiences and also experiences navigating all these systems that are designed to tear us down and continue to dehumanize our people. And so one of the things that like the magic that happens here at the center is that it's this organic, natural practice that we have of just seeing young people for people. And the intentionality behind that is the leaders who come through this organization, we just pass it on. Like it's just weird. It's not a physical thing, but it's just that practice that continues to get shared on and pass on to the generations to continue that practice of seeing people for people and keeping an open-mindedness and putting all your guard down to build trust with the young person that walks through any of the Young Women's Freedom Centers that are now, which is was a strategic move for us to plant seeds, all these Young Women's Freedom Centers across California, because we've seen a barrier that young people are getting displaced, pushed out. And so we said, hey, y'all, we got to start planting. Our young folks are moving. They're getting sent here, they're getting sent here. So let's start planting these centers so that they can be able to maneuver and know that they have community where they're landing at. And so that's like one of these strategic moves and approaches, like how Young Women's Freedom Center is moving, is physically locating where young folks are going. And also along with that strategy too, we are now trying to build out housing for young folks. So we got a beloved, one of our projects that we're pushing out is called Beloved Project. How I like to think of the center is like, it's or everybody's like, it's like the Avengers. We're just trying to, you know what I'm saying? We're trying to get to a place where how do we live equally or in a place where for folks to just be able to thrive and not survive. And so just highlighting the fact that like, this place that I work at is magical just due to the fact that like young people come through here, they go through these programs that we provide, and then the goal for us is to invest from our base to let them lead the work, and also invest in them financially, economically, also build their social caps, also, you know, what does it look like for folks, young people of color, to get back to owning land? Because the young folks that come through these doors who may be unhoused and navigating everything, they're freaking geniuses. They are freaking geniuses. I had a young person come in a while ago say, yo, how I get some stocks? I said, what? Oh, okay, you on that level. And so now what we've been doing is like, who are we collaborating and resourcing to help us support these young folks to maneuver in the world and to get our survival to thrive. And so our organization, again, is intentionally and strategically, spiritually, physically, and mentally investing in young folks by politically partnering up with system players to break those cycles, and also start just moving pieces that is necessary for our young folks to live.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little challenging. Just the question, I think, is a little challenging, right? Like, I don't necessarily know if many of the needs have really changed, you know. So like for us to pivot or adjust, you know, these are things that have been going on for a long time. I mean, there's obviously some contextual differences, right? Like, I do see that young people are more defiant against the system than they were previously. And I think a lot of that has to do with, I think what Dr. Marie's talking about is kind of almost an unintentional unschooling, right? There's people that are doing it intentionally, but I think the level of access to information people have now compared to what we had, say, in the 90s, when we were really being spoon-fed a lot of stuff and things were being dressed up really beautifully. And even now people fall into it. I don't want to, I mean, just to be honest, even all the Marvel movies, even the Black Panther, like things like that, they're feeding us very specific messages that are carrying forward the narratives that benefit the status quo. And so, when we see stuff like that exclusively, even now, I mean, I do see it as harmful. But I think growing up, it was exclusively what we were seeing. And so unless you really went out of your way to go find other information, that you just kind of got what you got, or if you weren't blessed enough to encounter somebody in your life that was like, hey, let me tell you the truth. Let me tell you what's really going on. Let me help provide the language for you to be able to describe your experiences, to describe what you're going through. And then, and then you're just kind of confused because you're being fed a narrative that completely conflicts with your experience in life. And so I do see young people, I don't know if it's Gen Z or Gen A or whoever is young right now, I do see them coming back and really pushing back against a lot of these narratives. And I think it is important for us to remember that young people are leaders, and so they do need support. They do need guidance, but they also have a lot more than I think we ever give them credit for. When I was coming up, I remember every time I reached the threshold of when the age of a young person, they'd say young people ages up to age 21. I turned 21, then it was 24. I turned 24, and then it was 30. So I was like, when's this shit gonna stop? Excuse me. But I think the point is that there is also this infantilization of people that I think inhibits us a lot, and it pushes us away from cultivating leadership. And I think some of that is driven by the leaders in our community. I do think that one of the things we want to do is, or at least I want to do, is kill the ego. I know one of the experiences I eventually had, and I've seen a lot, and I still see it today, is there are people that don't want to let go of their leadership roles. They don't want to pass the baton. They want to stay in the limelight. And I think that as long as we're doing that, even with our organizations, I think that a part of our work should be to, make our work obsolete, right? So we should completely shift focus or dissolve our organizations at some point, because there has to be an end goal. There has to be a mission that's accomplished. So, we're not trying to expand out and do a lot more than what we've been doing. We're staying focused on what we have in front of us, which is more than we can handle already. So, more political education, helping young people access tools to become critical thinkers, to push back against a lot of the schooling they received, how to analyze text, how to analyze information, and, properly analyze the situation. Because if you don't have a proper analysis, you can't come up with a proper conclusion or solution. So we also feel like there's a lack of organizers in the space, in a lot of spaces we're in. And so that's really a lot of what we're really pushing. And I just want to remind people, the average age of a member of the Black Panther Party was 19 years old. Fred Hampton was assassinated in his sleep when he was 21 years old. So, I think that obviously the circumstances are different, but we're not that far removed. And I know that we all work with really, really amazing young people who, we could either cultivate their leadership or we can hold them back. So a lot of what we want to focus on is creating those opportunities and partnering with organizations that do have more capacity to do more, because everybody doesn't have to do everything. I think that we should figure out how to work together and lean on each other, because there's more than enough resources to go around, especially if we work together. And I think that's another thing we need to really promote, is how to collaborate and do coalition work, because I think a lot of the splintering I saw when I was coming up as a young person made it really difficult to get things done, because the organizations were competing against each other, and there's no competition that brings us to liberation. So, well, now with internal competition. So.
Thank you. There's tremendous wisdom in Gem in like concrete ways. How might you put what you've learned today, or what you've heard today, or what has been affirmed for you, articulated for you, into practice? How might you share it with others? Building networks of support along with some other really amazing executive directors and youth organizers across the country. So please join us. Thank you to our panel. Have a beautiful day.